Mr. Toastmasters and guest. What a great speech Steve gave us tonight. I was very pleased to be here to hear it. It's about a topic I didn't know much about. And Steve immediately grabbed my attention by giving us an anecdote from his childhood about being bullied on the bus. He continued to talk about how that related to human rights, and the human rights that none of us see perhaps, the ones that we do generally see as obvious, such as freedom of religion and freedom of speech, but also talked about other types of rights that are tending to get a little bit washed out these days. I'm glad he told us some of the background to human rights and where they might have come from. He mentioned that post-World War II is when there was a real peak in regard to defining and supporting and protecting human rights, but that since that point, that sort of support has died away. Now, Stephen had quite a good structure to his speech, and I don't know Stephen and I haven't heard him speak before, but to me he seemed like an experienced Toastmaster. He started off with his introduction, which caught my interest, and then he moved through to an explanation and a definition of what it was he wanted to cover today, and then went into some of the history about the origin of that topic. He then identified a problem that existed in regard to the topic, which was the erosion of human rights since World War II. And following that, he then suggested a way that we might try and stem that problem. And I think that meant that each of us has a take-home today in regard to this topic of human rights. One of the things I found interesting was his description of governments as being the ones that are actually predominantly the causes of this erosion. And he gave us the example of Edward Snowden, who we've all seen in the news, and we understand now perhaps more about America's role in invading our privacy in all sorts of ways, and so he made it current and relevant to all of us. It's certainly a topic that I've started to think about more recently, and Edward Snowden's part of that equation, and now Stephen has augmented that. If I had some suggestions for improvement for Stephen, and there aren't many of them, I think the vocal variety maybe could have been a little bit more accentuated, although he did use some of it, so it's not a very harsh criticism at all. And my only other real problem may be that the conclusions seemed to come on us very quickly. So he told us about the reason for his speech, that he wanted to educate us, and he did that, and he told us about how we could go forward and try to educate others by pointing things out in the newspapers when we saw them as invasions of human rights. But I think he kind of came to an abrupt halt, and I suspect perhaps that he simply ran out of time, and I would have liked maybe an extra minute to see exactly how that would have turned out.